welcome to this week's disaster dispatch from September 13th to September 19th, 2025, where we talk about disasters that happened this past week. As the previous weeks, we're going to start with wildfires. So currently, the U.S. wildfire situation is relatively calm with only one new major large fire. The big change this week that is happening is the introduction of a new wildfire department. We'll get to that in a second. But if you look at the active map of wildfires here, it looks busy, but this is very, very calm for this time of year, especially in the western portion. Our big area of activity is up here in Washington, Idaho, and Oregon. California is very calm. Most of these fires you see down in this area are relatively well contained. This big one right here is the Dragon Bravo fire. It is also mostly contained as well. And then these fires out here you see in Wyoming and Colorado down in here are also mostly contained. These have been our mega fires for the year, as well as this one over here in Nevada. Most of these are relatively well contained at this point. They are just doing mop-up operations and mostly making sure they don't have any flare-ups. So it looks busy, but it is not that busy. We've actually dropped down a preparedness level. But this week, it was announced by the Department of the Interior and the Department of Agriculture that they would be creating a new department-ish thing called the U.S. Wildland Fire Service. It is basically combining all firefighting aviation across the United States, all fire research across the United States, and standardizing pay for firefighters across the United States, as well as removing regulations for fire retardant use. It will be called the U.S. Wildland Fire Service, but the Department of the Interior and the Department of Agriculture will still remain technically independent in their handling of wildland firefighters, since Congress did not approve the budget needed to create the entirely new department. So some stuff will be in the new department. Most of the actual firefighting resources will remain separate. It is a very weird thing that I'm not quite sure how they're going to do yet, but it feels like a hodgepodge of half solutions and decisions that will allegedly be mostly ready by January of 2026, which feels very, very optimistic, but we will see what happens. It's probably a good idea as a whole to have one particular service covering all wildland firefighting, since it is a very major part of every year. But I don't think that this particular way of going about it is the best way to do it. If you're going to do it, you need to do it wholly or keep it as is, because doing it half and half is going to be really confusing for everyone. But I guess we will see what happens if it does in fact start in January of 2026. Now, the current status for wildland fire in the United States is chill. Like it's very, very calm. We've dropped down to preparedness level 3. The current significant wildland fire outlook is looking better and better for the vast majority of the country for September and October. You can see September right here. You'll see that our hotspot right up here is the Pacific Northwest, as it has been for a while. We will see. You'll also see it continues in Northern California and Northern Nevada, and then down into Central California towards the very southern end portion. And then you've got your Northeast risk up in here that we had, and then all of Hawaii as well. All of Hawaii continues to be at major risk for September. They've had several fires this year already in Hawaii, but none of them have really panned out to much. They've done a very good job at keeping things under control. And then if we look ahead to October, since we are almost there, we have our usual late end of year risk. We've got Southern California with the Santa Ana winds that will start here relatively soon. We've got Northern California along the coast, which is not all that unusual. Then also we have Hawaii that is still going to be entirely at risk. Again, they've done a very good job. And then over here, you've got your Appalachian and your Smoky Mountain risk that we tend to have every year. A couple years ago, there was a major fire in the Smoky Mountains that caused a lot of damage that made big news. So this is a yearly risk up. It'll probably be all the way over into Tennessee as well. So keep a lookout for that in October, especially if you live in the Great Smoky Mountains or the Appalachian Mountains in North Carolina, Tennessee. Actually, that area that went through Hurricane Helene last year. Depending on how things are, there could be significantly more debris on the ground to burn. So if anything does happen to get burning, it could be a major issue. Now we're going to skip Canada because Canada, for the most part, is calming down. We're also going to talk about Europe real quick. So it's mostly contained now to Portugal, Spain, and southern Italy, as well as some down in the Baltics. This area over here in Ukraine, this is because of artillery strikes and all of that. It's not actually wildfires. But as you can see down here in Spain and Portugal, we are mostly contained down here. A lot of this is agricultural burning, and then you've got some down in Sicily and southern Italy as well, and then over here in the Balkans, not Baltics, Balkans. Awkward. Looking forward for Europe, it looks great. They are finally getting out of this crazy season that they have had. It's the most acres burned, hectares burned, technically, in Europe for several years. There have actually been several protests from firefighters in Spain about how busy they've been and how poorly they've been paid and trained and treated for the year. So things have been very busy. It's been a very, very active wildland fire season. Season feels unfair. It's been a very active wildland fire year for especially down here in Spain and Portugal. They've been hit really hard. France has had its largest wildfire down here since 1946. And then Greece has been hit incredibly hard this year, and then northern Turkey as well, up not quite Istanbul, right over here, just south and east of the Bosporus, has been very, very active. Turkey lost, I believe it was 11 firefighters in a single wildland incident when they were overrun by a fire that suddenly switched directions, wind switched directions. So it's been very active in Europe, and it's good to see this map green because it has not been green in a very long time this summer. So hopefully they can get a little bit more under control, get everything back to normal. They can calm down and take a breather before things really kick off again. All right, let's move on to global hurricanes, starting with the Atlantic Ocean. There is currently one storm in the Atlantic Ocean. It is Tropical Storm Gabriel. Gabriel is currently looking a little bit better organized as a storm than it was earlier this week. It has begun to expand, and it will likely reach hurricane status either today, as I'm recording this, September 21st, maybe tomorrow, September 22nd. It is continuing to drift northwestward, and then will shift to north, almost due north, and then go out into the ocean as a fish storm and not really bother anyone. It may possibly end up hitting maybe Category 2, maybe Category 3 strength, might end up probably sitting at Category 1 hurricane strength as it spins out in the Atlantic Ocean and really bothers no one in particular. Now, looking ahead at how we're looking for the rest of the year, current sea surface temperatures in the area are relatively warm, so if anything does manage to actually spin up in the next couple weeks in the MDR down here, or even in the Gulf up in here, as we look at these storms starting to spin up here potentially, we may have something if it can get going and take advantage of these temperatures. We may have something, but currently nothing has really been able to take hold. There's been a lot of dry air, a lot of wind shear over the Atlantic this year, so nothing has really been able to take advantage of these incredibly warm sea surface temperatures. So we will see as we continue through September and into October. Remember, it doesn't end until the beginning of November, and there have been some strong storms at the end of September and early October. So it's always a good idea to pay attention. Now, As we move on here to the Eastern Pacific, we have one invest currently that is sitting out over just off the coast of Mexico. It is not currently expected to develop into much for one reason in particular. Sea surface temperatures off the coast of the Gulf of California and out in the actual Pacific itself are relatively cool. So there's not much fuel there to actually do anything with. So if anything does continue to develop up there, it probably won't end up being much of anything at all. It just depends on the track. That one is currently looking to do a bunch of nothing. Looking at the overall, looking at the overall temperatures, anything that manages to develop down in off the coast of Mexico, down in here, as it moves up this direction, may end up being able to reach hurricane status, depending on how fast its forward motion is. But once it gets past here, this line right here, it will probably very quickly fall apart. These are relatively cold temperatures, so it's unlikely that anything will be able to go out this direction towards Hawaii and actually cause any problems. There's just not enough fuel there for these storms. Now, moving forward, we have several storms in the Western Pacific that are currently causing major problems. This was Tropical Storm Neoguri the other day, but since this picture was taken, we have incredibly developed. Tropical Storm Neoguri has turned into Category 4 Typhoon Neoguri as it spins just west of Japan. It has developed a very significant eye wall, and it looks incredibly developed on satellite. If we look at the IR imagery here, it looks very well developed. That is a very pretty storm. In fact, the good news is this one is expected to just spin off into the Pacific Ocean. So looking at it on satellite, it does look good. It looks well developed. These are the storms you like to see, those with the really good structure, the really good eye, and no risk of actually hitting anyone. You can see the eye right there in the middle. You can see it's kind of wobbling a little bit, but it is likely strengthening. You can see the dark black developing around that eye. It'll likely strengthen a little bit before it curves off towards the west and ends up as a fish storm bothering no one. Our next storm is Tropical Storm Metag, unsure exactly. It actually made landfall just the other day, just near Hong Kong, and is currently the remnants of Metag. This was just before it made landfall in Hong Kong. You can see the area right in here. It went up this direction. It caused some major flooding in the area, but not much more than that. Moving on, we currently have Super Typhoon Regasa. Now, Super Typhoon Regasa is just that, a super typhoon. You can see this very, very tight eye right in the center of the storm. It is doing, you can see it right there, right in the center of the storm. You can see that eye right there. It is an incredibly well-developed storm. Currently has a minimum central pressure of 911 millibars. It has max wind speeds of 145 knots, which is about 166 miles per hour, which is a easy Category 5 typhoon. This is a catastrophic storm, and it is, as of right now, still strengthening. Look at that development on IR. It is still actively strengthening as it moves just north of the Philippines and just south of Taiwan. It's going to split that strait right there. Here, we'll look at the track. You can see how it's going to split that strait right there in between. Now, luckily, it has shifted south, so it's not going to make a direct, may make a partial direct impact on Hong Kong, but it will get less of the city itself. It is also expected to weaken to a Category 3 hurricane when it actually does make landfall here in the southern portion of China. Hopefully it continues to weaken, but right here in the next couple days, that would be September 24th. So we have 3 days until we have to worry about that in southern China. But this is a well-developed storm right now. It is every bit Category 5, and it will likely cause some catastrophic damage as it moves ashore. This area Down in here, you can kind of see the outline, purple pink outline right there. We'll likely end up with some major rainfall as well as some major winds as the storm moves just north of it. But hopefully that will just be the not the dirty side, the side that's getting less, because you have your forward movement up here on the top, so your winds are going to be significantly stronger up here. But you're still going to have relatively strong winds down here because your storm's spinning like such. So if it's moving this way, that means prevailing winds are blowing that direction, which means your stronger winds are going to be up here. There's a lot of scribbles here, but that means the winds blowing this way are having to blow against the prevailing winds this way. So let me erase here real quick. Erase. So if here, we'll use a different color. We'll use blue. Okay. So if your prevailing winds are going this direction at 10 miles per hour, let's say, and your storm is has wind speeds up here of 166, you may have wind gusts of 176. However, if we change my colors here again, if we have the same 10 mile an hour wind speeds, the winds on this side are 166. That's going to be minus 10, so it'd actually be 156, which is still a lot. Don't get me wrong. It will be bad for the northern portion of the Philippines, but hopefully not as bad. But we will see as things continue on. Moving on to our next section of fires and explosion, we have a Madrid bar explosion back on September 13th in Madrid, Spain. The explosion itself caused 25 injuries and killed 2 individuals, one who was illegally living in the space next to the bar. First responders were on site and found the individual buried under debris, deceased not long after the explosion. It would take 24 hours and a missing persons report for authorities to bring in a cadaver dog to find the second deceased individual. The source of the gas and the ignition source are still under investigation. Based on some photos from the scene, this was a lower explosive limit explosion. There is minimal fire damage inside the actual building itself, and the walls were only partially pushed out by the blast. So you can see how there's a lot of debris here. Like if you look here and you look over here and you look at this door and you can see on the ceiling, there is looking at this, there is no fire damage whatsoever anywhere in this photo. There's a lot of blast damage, but there is no fire damage. And if you look as well, you can especially see on this door right here, this exit door. Yeah, that's exit in Spanish. I know a little bit of Spanish. Whoops. But if you look at the exit door there and you look at the actual walls and the debris itself, it's only kind of pushed rather than exploded. I don't know how to put that into a better phrasing. Usually if you have something that's on more towards the stoichiometric, you'll have more breaking of pieces. We have breaking of pieces, but the pieces in a stoichiometric explosion will be in small chunks rather than these where it's just kind of like you can see this right here. This is part of, I believe, the ceiling, most likely, that is basically in one giant chunk. The door's still in one piece. All of this stuff over here is still in one piece. Like everything is relatively in a big chunk rather than broken up into a bunch of chunks. So we'll have to keep an eye on this one to see what they come up with after the investigation is complete. Our next one here is a Bradford house explosion in Bradford, England that also happened on Saturday, September 13th. The explosion itself occurred in an unoccupied home that injured 5 people. 3 were a family from a nearby home, and 2 were men who were apparently near or in the home at the time of the explosion. I believe the news reports were a little fuzzy, but I believe the family of 3 was in this home on the left side here, and received only minor injuries in the explosion. The 2 men were found in the street in front of the home over here. Both injured, one severely, one with minor injuries. Both of them were subsequently arrested for metal theft. This appears to have been a stoichiometric explosion on the lower explosive limit end based on the shattering of debris. but the lack of post-blast fire damage. So you can see this one, unlike the previous one, has blown the roof off. A lot of the debris in here is pulverized. It didn't really get out into these neighboring homes, but it did cause significant explosion out. You can see there's debris back here in the background in the ground. The whole front wall is gone. The whole roof is gone. Everything has been blown out into the street and around into various different areas. Excuse me. If I were to guess, and this is only a guess because nothing has actually been reported yet, it seems like the two men that were injured in this explosion stole copper gas lines. Now, in the United States, copper gas lines are not common. It's usually iron or plastic of some sort. However, in England, especially with propane, they do use copper gas lines. Occasionally, they will use it with natural gas in like smaller homes, more older homes like this one. So it's very, very probable that they were stealing copper and thought it was a water line and realized it was not a water line and it was actually a copper gas line, and it allowed it to leak into the building and eventually explode. That seems to be what happened here. Moving on to our next, we have a fire at a warehouse in Brooklyn in New York City that started around 11:30 p.m. on Wednesday, September 17th, which ended up being a 5-alarm fire. You can see fires emitting from the roof up here. We have some significant glow. You can see back here along the back portion. Now, this was probably some reflection from this fire coming out the roof here. However, in the aftermath, the entire upper 2 stories of this warehouse were completely gutted by this fire. This building was originally constructed in the 1870s and was made of heavy wood timbers, which explains why it burned so well. The warehouse was in use by various art studios to create and restore artwork of various ages. Due to the unusual layout and rapid spread of the fire, firefighters were forced to fight the fire from the exterior. The roof and 4th floor collapsed, and the building suffered catastrophic damage. Currently, the fire is under investigation. No one was inside the building at the time, so they didn't have to make any entry. They essentially just protected exposures and then dumped water on the top in an attempt to keep it from spreading as much as possible. Our next fire is a school fire in Quebec, Canada on Friday, September 12th at around 8:30 p.m. Now, this one is before this one, but it came in after I made the last video, so we're going to cover it in this one. The fire quickly spread throughout the school and caused the entire building to collapse. You can see how it is burning through the roof. You can see ventilation right here. It's gone up through the roof. It ended up going all the way across the top of the building and collapsing the entire building. No one was inside at the time because it was 8:30 p.m. and school was closed. Investigators have determined that the fire started from an electrical failure, but have not stated what exactly failed to cause the fire. And then our last disaster to cover for this week was another bus crash in Nigeria. There was one last week. Well, the last one I missed last week because I was taking a vacation. But we are back in Nigeria. A bus carrying 40 people from a wedding to the bride's new home in Nigeria suddenly plunged into a river. The bus was only rated to carry 18 people, but had been obviously heavily overloaded. The driver at the time was concerned that the bridge over the river was not able to hold the weight of the bus, so he got out to inspect it, came back, told a few people to get off, and then decided to drive over it anyway. As he did, he was trying to go around an iron bar that had broken off on the bridge, and when he did so, the bus tipped over and fell into the river. In total, 19 women and children were killed in the disaster. As of right now, they have found 18 of the 19 individuals. They're still looking for the last person. And with that, we've reached the end of this week's Disaster Dispatch. You can join us next week for next week's Disaster Dispatch, or on Monday, September 22nd, or Mondays every week for Disasters in History, where we go through disasters that have happened in history for the upcoming week. So Disaster Dispatch covers the previous week of stuff that had just happened. Mondays Disasters in History covers the week ahead of what disasters happened that week in history. So, as always, thank you guys. If you like, subscribe, let me know all of that. And as always, stay safe and remember to check your smoke detector batteries.